Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about systematizing the informal walkthrough process to help you maximize your instructional growth. We're going to be talking about ways to establish systematized walkthrough tools, establishing good look-fors, collecting data, and best practices for unpacking that data with your teachers. I'm Brandon. I'm Director of Innovation here with digiCOACH, and I've been supporting our team since we started doing this a little over a decade ago. I've got with me Kathy, our Director of Curriculum and Research, and we'll share just a little bit about ourselves as we jump into the presentation today. Kathy.
Well, I'm a serial educator, everything from kindergarten to community college, administration. I have about 10 credentials, so I've just reinvented myself. But I became aware of digiCOACH as a district director, and I have been searching for something to help me with walkthroughs. I had a Google form, but I didn't want to disaggregate the data, and nobody else did either. And I needed information to help the teachers. I wanted to provide feedback because I believe in that. I believe feedback is very important. And I wanted to model what I wanted my teachers to do. I wanted to give immediate feedback. And after a long day, a 20-minute email per person was a little much for me. So when I found digiCOACH and their system, it allowed me to streamline my walkthroughs and to really maximize my time. And I had beautiful reports and meaningful actionable data to help improve student achievement. And that's why digiCOACH was so valuable to me, because I could share it with teachers, I could use it for reports, I could do whatever I needed to do, and we all had the information we needed to move the school and the district forward.
Thanks, Kathy. I come more from a technology side of things. I've worked in school districts as a tech, and I quickly saw that if the technology wasn't simple and efficient and effective, it just didn't get used. So we do our best when we're working with our clients to make sure that everything we're doing is enhancing your processes that are already in place, and then looking for ways to tie that into providing feedback to your teachers. Research tells us giving feedback is powerful, right? We know that getting into classrooms is something that we should be doing, something most administrators do, but there's certain times where walkthroughs happen and teachers get a thumbs up and that's it. So we want to help make sure that that's not the case. We know that feedback's powerful and our research tells us that. If you look at something like John Hattie's research around what works well in classrooms, what works well at site levels, we often encourage you guys to pull high yield strategies into your digiCOACH or into your walkthrough tools, right? We're from digiCOACH, so we're going to be sharing some tips that you can use in digiCOACH, but these practices work whether you're doing a pen and paper or a Google Sheet or another tool. But first, start with high yield strategies. What do you want to see happening in your classrooms? And look for things that align with your needs and your programs. Things like student-teacher relationships, classroom discussions. Both of those strategies have around 2 years of academic growth, according to the research, for sites that are doing that with fidelity. And when you start looking at site level strategies, what can you do as an administrator at your campus? Well, things like maximizing feedback to your teachers has just as high as an effect size as those student-teacher relationships. We also want to encourage you to get your teachers working together, have them be a evaluator of their own impact with their students. And so looking at benchmark data, looking at observational data and other forms, getting that information in the hands of your teachers has an even higher effect size than just giving them feedback. And that number one thing that we want to really support is that idea of collective teacher efficacy, or I like to think of it as the we is smarter than me. It's going to happen as you get teachers working together. It's going to happen as you support those processes. And it's something that the research tells us our sites that have that are really seeing outcomes in growth in their campuses, up to 4 years of academic growth in a single school year when you have sites with that collective teacher efficacy. So what can you do to support that? Well, you can head out to classrooms and do walkthroughs. Focus on certain initiatives, set your coaching cycles in place, and collect some data, and use that data to drive conversations with your teachers. Now, with something like digiCOACH, you'll be able to collect both observational and coaching data. Something like a Google form, you're going to be able to collect your observational data, but you might be able to, or you might be missing rather, that coaching aspect, right? What are you telling your teachers? Unpacking that data with your teachers during staff meetings or individual conferences or PLC groups is really going to help drive those professional development decisions. And tying those PD talks back into your future walkthroughs is a great way to make sure that your professional development initiatives are being reinforced. We are creatures of habit, and we tend to forget what we learned during professional development sessions, and we fall back into our comfort zones. So if you're sending folks out to a conference this summer or this past summer, getting back into classrooms and reinforcing those newly learned practices is a great way to make sure that those research-based practices are getting implemented. It's also a great way to support individual and collective teacher efficacy, according to research, And our sites that are doing this, that we're working with, are seeing those increases in their student outcomes as they support their teachers. Some of our sites have seen increase in graduation rates. We've had others outpace the rest of their county, schools in their county, in areas like math and science test scores, or excuse me, math and ELA test scores. So our sites that are using digiCOACH with fidelity and following this system are really seeing those outcomes there that we like to see. Now, are teachers getting feedback? Well, according to the widget effect, a big research study across 15,000 teachers, no, not really. So this survey, if you've never heard of it, it's called the widget effect. It surveyed 15,000 teachers across 12 different districts, and nearly 75% of the teachers said they didn't even get any feedback about their performance on their evaluation. Most teachers are just rated good or great, right? And we know sometimes not rating them good or great, maybe that makes a little extra work for the administrators that are doing those evaluations. We know our novice teachers are going neglected, right? Your first year teachers coming in that need the most support, oftentimes they're not getting that, and maybe they're not sticking around in the profession either. And for those teachers that do need support, well, they're not getting it either, right? We see folks making it to the classrooms and then a thumbs up or maybe a sticky note, right? Teachers need feedback. Teachers want feedback, right? They want to know what's working well in their classrooms and what types of things can they work on to support and enhance their profession. So why aren't teachers getting coached? Well, Kathy, as a former user of digiCOACH, suffered some of these things. So I'll let her talk about some of these practices that make it hard for teachers to get feedback.
We know that everybody has a schedule that doesn't match what actually goes on during the day. That's just how that works. And we're all time poor, teachers, administrators, observers, but mostly we don't have a system a systematized walkthrough framework. We had a big folder through a paper full of paper evaluations that in all honesty, we didn't read again. So I find that if you calendar the time and you honor that time, it gets done, but people don't do it because they don't calendar time. We have administrators that lack coaching expertise. They're nervous about a math class because they're not a math person. Unsatisfactory evaluations make a lot of work for people. If you're going to move forward to remove a teacher, that's a lot of work. Why not just help them, coach them? And then whether people don't have a system that allows a lot of people to get in and help. So they focus on observational checklists that we know don't work, and they don't have something like digiCOACH.
Thanks, Kathy. So what is digiCOACH, right? It's a tool that's going to help administrators when they're in classrooms. Essentially, it helps them collect data. It helps them give a place to take notes that they might want to talk about with that teacher in person later on. But most importantly, it's a feedback tool. It's a way to make sure that every time an administrator visits a classroom or an instructional coach or a peer observer or even a student in some places, that teachers are getting feedback. They want to know what's happening in their classrooms. They want to know what strategies they're doing well, where they can grow, and digiCOACH helps with that process. So today we want to talk to you more about just the big picture. What do you got to do to establish your walkthrough process, whether it's with digiCOACH or not? You want to make sure that you have actionable data. And so first you need to set your focus. What are you looking for when you go into classrooms? And then what's your coaching cycle going to look like across that school year? When you're in classrooms, as you're focusing on these look-fors, you're collecting some data. Are you providing feedback? Are you matching that feedback with your teachers? Are you reviewing your data with your teachers? How are you having those calibration talks? And how are you sharing that data? Kathy, I know you used to pull your data from digiCOACH a lot and share with your teachers. You want to talk a little bit about how you would pull maybe some of that information here?
Would look at a report that we have. We have a suite of reports that is very sophisticated and excellent. You can disaggregate your data thousands of ways, but I always match my observations to the feedback statements. digiCOACH has a very unique system of reporting observations to teachers. We use feedback statements and suggestions to help the teacher rather than a checklist. And we have ways to review the data with the teachers to help them work together. They become more data comfortable, more data aware, and how that data can help drive their instruction to help maximize student achievement. Because everything around data is great to collect data and look at it, disaggregate it, talk about it. But what's next? How do we use that? What do we do with the data? And how do we check that? When we've tried to institute something new or something to correct something, is that happening? Because everything for me was always about what do we do next?
So Well, what's next or what's first, really? Well, first you got to define what do you want to look for in classrooms? What are going to be your high yield strategies that you're going to focus on this year? And there's different ways we can do this. With digiCOACH, we've got a dozen of different or dozens of different editions we've created over the years. But this is our kind of most popular tool that folks can use off the shelf. Some terminology that we'll be using today. This is your edition, right? What are you focusing on across your edition? Each column is something that we call a focus area. Within those focus areas, we have our look fors. So when you create your own tool, well, you might start with a blank template and say, okay, well, what's my focus? Well, what are common tools that you can kind of bring in? What are common things that you might want to look at to help identify your focus? Districts oftentimes are bringing in their district needs, or sites bringing in their site needs, right? They might be looking at their benchmark data and saying, hey, we know we need some extra support in math, so maybe you're bringing in some math specific initiatives into this. Or if there's program specific things like AVID, PBIS practices, elements to support your social emotional learning, or even things like induction programs, you can bring those initiatives in here to help reinforce those processes, right? If you're sending teachers to an AVID summer conference, they're learning about these Wicker strategies, bring some Wicker elements into your focus so that you can reinforce those practices, especially if you're taking AVID school or district wide. Looking for those research-based strategies, make sure things you're putting in here are, supported by research, are things that are going to give you high yield effect sizes, and then start putting your teachers or start putting your team together as you're putting this. You want to get multiple stakeholders in place when you're creating your edition. That's going to help create some buy-in. It's going to help make sure that you have feedback from your different school sites and from all levels. So you might bring a few teachers into this process, especially if you're at your school sites. For our district team members, bringing in some site administrators, some site or district coaches is great. And again, getting some feedback from your teachers as you're defining your look for tools here is a great way to get that buy-in and provide that transparency. For our places where we have strong unions, it's also a great way to kind of get that union buy-in to the process as well, to say, hey, these are the things we're looking for, and these are the things we're going to be supporting in our classrooms. Now, I will encourage you to keep that group kind of as a core team first, and then bring in outsiders to solicit additional information. Avoid having like 20 people in the room when you're developing this tool. If you've got 10 people in the room, you might walk out of that first meeting with 15 different opinions, right? So keep an eye on how large that group gets, put a core tool together, and then solicit that feedback from the tools as kind of a step 2 to help make sure you don't end up with too many different opinions. Now, when you start looking at your look fors, when you start writing content around what you want to see in classrooms, we want to encourage you to make sure they're objective, they're observable, things we can see, right? Professional responsibilities, things like, was a teacher arriving to school? Were they dressed professionally? Those are elements that you can put into an observation tool, but they're not always things that you'll see in an informal classroom visit. If you've got to go back and check a teacher's records or a student's records, that's not a look for that we'd encourage you to have in an informal classroom walkthrough tool. Look for things that are coachable, things that you can measure, right? And then when you start writing that language, make sure that it's supporting your data validity. Make sure your look fors are succinct and they're not looking for too many things at one time. Here's an example of one of our look fors for procedures. Note the language, real quick, simple, succinct. Routines and procedures are facilitating learning. Now, down in the bottom half of the screen here, we have a procedures look for from a state tool. There's little loss of instructional time. The teacher's management instructional groups and transitions are handling material. There's minimal guidance or property. There's multiple data collection points here, but this is one standard. It's one look for in this state tool. So it starts to convolute your data a little bit, and it's hard to judge. Plus, I got to read that probably 2 or 3 times when I'm in the classroom. That might take me out of the mode of being an observer, right? I'm trying to be in the class. I'm trying to engage with students, see what they're working on. And if I'm staring at my look for, trying to understand what I'm looking for, that can take you out of that process. So keep your language short, simple. If you got to read it more than once, it's probably poorly written, is kind of how we like to say and narrow things down.
Grades, we know grades don't grow learners, and scored evaluations or a checklist to a teacher doesn't grow a teacher. It just causes stress. So power that you have is in the conversational feedback. If you are trying to be an administrator, an observer, and be an instructional partner with teachers, it's the feedback and the support that produces change. So the power is there, not in a checklist. And that's why digiCOACH has a unique way of communicating via email with teachers to give them feedback.
So Feedback, whether it's from digiCOACH or it's from an administrator with a pen and paper or a post-it note, it should be positive. It should be helpful, right? We never want to encourage anything that sounds aggressive. Here's another example of a feedback statement from digiCOACH. In this particular strategy, it's supporting management to increase student focus and minimize off-task behavior. Avoid teaching from a fixed location. A more aggressive way to say that would be, hey, move. Could you get away from your laptop? Right? We don't want to encourage folks to have that aggressive feedback. We want every time that you're providing feedback to teachers, whether it's a strategy that you're reinforcing as you saw things in classrooms, or whether you're offering a coaching tip, those glows and grows, if you will, you want to make sure that you're providing that feedback in a helper, not a hammer format. Now, with that feedback, you're going to want a way to collect that information, and something like digiCOACH will help. We're going to be able to keep track of which strategies and coach tips you've used through digiCOACH. If you're going into classrooms and you're using a pen and paper, or you're using something like a Google form, you might have a place where you can take notes, but there's no easy way to quantify that information. With something like digiCOACH, we're the only tool that makes that possible. We're going to keep track of every tip that you're sharing, and we're going to help you provide and see that information in your reports. Now, this tool is a great coaching tool for your administrators. One of the problems that we see when new administrators come into classrooms for the first time, they may not know what to say. They may not be a good coach. They might be more aggressive in their feedback or more critical. If you've got that math teacher that's been, teaching math for a while, and they're now a principal and they're walking into an English language arts classrooms, they may feel lost. So having a library of tips and strategies and things that you can share is a great way to make sure that everybody can be a great coach. Your experts at your district, at your site, get to write feedback statements, and that then gets disseminated out to everybody to use, helping to support folks that are not experts in the criteria. I mentioned Avid earlier. I'm not an Avid expert, but Kathy is. Kathy's got strategies that support Avid initiatives. I could go into classrooms and use those practices, even though I'm not an Avid expert, but I'll sound like I am. So how do we start putting that data into practice? Well, after you've been in classrooms, you've collected data, you started providing feedback to your teachers. So what? Now what, right? What do we have? Well, through something like digiCOACH, you're going to get reports available for you. We have 12 reports that you can slice and dice thousands of different ways. If you're using something like a Google form, great. You're going to get a spreadsheet, and then you've created yourself an extra job. You're going to need to start disaggregating that data and having somebody run that report, which might be you if you've created your own form. So something like digiCOACH here, we have our 12 different reports. Our reports are available in different formats. Our bar graph reports give you a nice bird's eye view of what's happened across your campus or across your district. And you can slice and dice this by individual grades or subjects, sites or teachers, specific time period, every way that you could think. We also have reports that are focused more on the coaching, something unique to digiCOACH, right? As we're sharing those strategies or coaching tips with our teachers, we then get to see which tips we're seeing in classrooms most frequently. At the top of this report, I can see I've shared a coaching tip in the area of relevance 11 times. Or scrolling down a little bit there, I've shared a strategy 9 times, and I've actually clicked that number 9, and I can see which teachers at my campus I've shared that strategy with. So when it comes time to identifying teachers to maybe host a model lesson or to talk about a practice, I've got that data as well, right? Not only do I know relevance is taking place in our classrooms, I know what strategies teachers are using to build relevance into their rooms. And then you want to know, where have you been? So something like our frequency detail report gives you that information. You're able to see the frequency that you visited every classroom, as well as your colleagues. So it's a great tool to help you kind of plan your walks and help as you're heading out to classrooms. So how's digiCOACH help? Well, I'll let Kathy kind of summarize our session here today as we wrap up for you.
Well, we talked about reasons why you don't go in and coach, or you don't, there's no reason that you can really pinpoint why you haven't been in the classroom. So we did that for you. So without a systematized walkthrough tool, you don't even know what you're looking for, and you can't even really explain that to your teachers. But in digiCOACH, you can set your framework. You can share that, and everybody knows what you're looking for when you're looking for it. And you can set those cycles, evaluate the data, and then you know whether to continue with that in your observations or maybe move on to something else. Set the time and honor it. Calendar time is important. You've got to do that and honor it. Average walkthrough for an administrator with digiCOACH is anywhere between 8 and 12 minutes. Calendar that time and honor it. They can wait for 12 minutes. And if you're not really an expert in coaching, or it's academic coaching is very much like athletic coaching. You offer observations, you give tips on what was going well, and you coach about what can be done better, maybe a delta, we call them. So that gives you some expertise with the pre-written statements that you can you can place them in as they are. You can edit them. You can add your own statements via speech to text. It's a wonderful feature. You can see that on our website. This platform also allows many different people to observe, whether you're an administrator, a coach, a district office personnel. Everybody can use the tool and give feedback, and you can calibrate together and make decisions based on the reports, the data, and conversations with teachers as to what is needed for professional development. Your PD can actually be driven by actionable data. So the ways for the reports are amazing, because you have that for board presentations, for LCAP, for any kind of WASC accreditation or any statewide accreditation. I'm talking California language right now, but any kind of reports that you would need to show the data that you're collecting and who's collecting data and what are you doing with that data. We have that, and the teachers never see the checklist. Let's say you go in and it's a very, very bumpy lesson that day, and the checklist would have had 4 X's today. The teachers don't see that. All they see is what you put. You have the control over what you put in the email and what it says to that teacher. We help you with that, but it's always helpful language. And if you don't have if you don't have digiCOACH, get digiCOACH, because it changed everything for me and my district and the schools I worked with. One of the schools had an 80-point jump in special ed scores in 1 year. And we had great student growth throughout that time. So let us help you. Let us upgrade your walkthroughs. Let us help you with digiCOACH.
Well, we appreciate your time today. Please feel free to contact our team. You can contact Kathy or me, or visit digicoach.com to learn more about our walkthrough tool. Hopefully the strategies we shared today, you can take those back as you're defining your paper walkthrough tools. And yeah, when you're ready to upgrade that to the next level, feel free to contact us. We will be here to help. Thank you so much for your time today. Wish you guys all a great conference and look forward to talking to you soon.